Interest rates, where are they heading? We have seen inflation figures probably, well, we're expecting inflation figures to be on the upside, I guess. My expectations are just based on everybody else's expectations. So looks like food prices was a little bit higher than expected, which, 3% plus inflation figures is probably not good for the forecasting of where interest rates will end up if you are a borrower or going to be a new borrower. You might want to consider fixing longer term some or all of your loans. Could be a thing that you start to think about. Not that it is the right thing to do, of course. Speak to a financial advisor, but what else is actually supporting interest rates to probably head up later on is the economy. The economy is actually doing better than expected as well, led by the export part of the economy this time around. Whereas previously we've come out usually pinning our hopes on housing or migration. It's good to see that we remember that export is still the backbone of this country as well. So in terms of GDP, inflation, what does it all mean? Really what it means is that at some point the central bank needs to increase the OCR, right? But that's maybe not so important to you. Why is that? Because, well, the OCR is going to be announced. The next review is the end of Feb, right? Now, all expectations are that there might be no movement, okay? In fact, some people were expecting another cut at some point or an increase later on in the year. What is important, though, is what we expect the central bank to do later on and the other funders of wholesale markets and what they expect. So those things feed in. So the Reserve Bank is the big game in town, but it's not the only game in town. There are outside global factors as well that have an impact. So I guess the certainty is that you can never be completely certain, but there is some upward pressure building in terms of fixed rates. However, the only little thing I would say is a little bit of a hope for us is that the banks seem to be in the mood to compete. Now, before December, well, around December, we saw an amazing cashback offer by one of the banks. The other banks followed suit and matched it, market leading, never seen it before. And what that meant was a lot of refinancing took place. Great for consumers. That had an expiry date. That's now gone. However, we expect that the banks, well, it's a clear signal that they're willing to compete. So, a market leading fixed term coming out at some point would be expected, especially when you consider that some of the lending rules have eased a little bit. So triple CFA, which got refreshed, the banks have actually started to really get a handle on that and have embedded that in their culture a little bit more, meaning we're seeing loans approved now that were a little bit harder to do about a year ago. So that's a good sign. Central bank has actually also added their little bit of support as well by easing up some of the macroprudential tools in December. So a little bit more support for low deposit buyers and her first home buyers, but also investors, surprisingly. So we are seeing some interesting things that are allowed in that space that weren't allowed before. So yeah, excited about that. Feel like that maybe investors will become more active this year. And then you've got planning rules changing as well at the same time. Not to mention the minor dwelling thing, right? So investors might be looking for something with a little bit of land this year where you slap a minor dwelling on and your cash flow starts to look really good. In fact, some investors may be forced to look at that because if you don't, then rents are really not going to be skyrocketing like they did previously when you buy an investment, because if everybody else is putting up a minor dwelling, it should have downward pressure on rents. Great if you're a tenant. Let's face it, as a tenant, well, I haven't been a tenant for a while. I am in this building, actually, come to think of it. But a residential tenant, I mean, just having increases year after year has been no fun, right? It's no good. So, and I don't think it's great for the economy either. So it's great to see that supply actually does have an impact on rents for the better. When you increase supply, you do see some support for people renting, which is great for the economy because that's more money you can spend on other parts of the economy. So, but as an investor, you have to think a little bit harder. You've got to think about your cash flow a little bit more if you want to get into the property investment game. As a home buyer, if you're trading up, and you're selling a home and that home has a little bit of land, you're probably in luck this year because there's rules probably supporting that kind of activity. A little bit more. So look, in terms of what else did I want to cover? I've got a little list here. That's why I keep looking down actually. And that is, I think I've covered basically everything apart from, oh yeah, triple CFA. I mentioned that. Some of the banks are actually doing refinances with less paperwork, which is welcome to see, coming from those days when they, used to look at all the cafe transactions and all that, and Netflix used to have an impact on whether you could afford an additional bedroom in your next home, right? That's all. Those days are gone. So now it's back to more around like common sense and what you propose in the next home, instead of the bank becoming a private investigator and digging through everything. They are becoming more helpful in that regard. So that's great to see, and it just means that things speed up a little bit as well in terms of competition. So, but anyway, before you make any decisions on the stuff that I talk about, that you see other people talking about, talk to a good financial advisor like ourselves, because we can definitely tailor-make things, especially when it comes to fixed rates, depending on your future self, because it's not just all about what the headlines say, it's really what you're trying to do in the coming years as well, right? That's a major part of how you structure your lending. Thanks for watching anyway. Hamish at monline.co.nz.